Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today on Gamifying Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I am joined by Neaka, who will introduce herself in a second, who has been working with us at SANS to come up with this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month training offering from SANS Security Awareness. So, Neaka, you want to introduce yourself really quick?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carl. So my name is Neaka Balloge. I am the Program Manager for Information Security Awareness and Training at Cvent. And I also am an SSA content developer here at SANS. So very excited that we can interrupt your lunch or your breakfast or your dinner, depending where you're joining around the world, and share with you a little bit of what we've been cooking up for the month of October.
All right, so with that, we are going to dive right in. Now, we're actually going to start off a little bit different and talk a little bit about just October generally, what we've learned at SANS in terms of best practices, some things that a lot of our clients have told us works well in engaging their learners during Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Neaka is going to share also her personal experience of doing that year after year in the various organizations that she's done it. So that's how we're going to start, and then we'll actually get into the Snack Attack program. So you should be seeing my slides at this point. I am going to ask Neaka to kind of lead some of this part of the what we've seen in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but we wanted to start with a quick audience poll. So if you could please pull up your Slack channel, for those of you on Slack, you will see a hallway channel in there. I think it's called Hallway Carl Neaka. And if you could drop in there just a quick message back to us, yes, no, still in the process, maybe not, we don't know. Have you planned your October program yet? And what we want to do is open up some conversation in the next Slack channel. What are you doing for October? What's worked for you in the past? Can you share with the community ideas, techniques, procedures that you've used effectively that'll help everybody have a great October? And with that, Neaka is going to share a little bit about her experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Carl. So I see a lot of discussion already in the Slack. So it looks like we have a lot of folks right now that are either in the process. We have a couple like Heather here. It looks like very ambitious. And yes, they have completed their planning. For those of you that are still either not yet completed or underway, typically, is there a time of the year when you do start your planning? Anybody want to shout out in the chat when you actually get your planning underway? All right, so we got some people just starting. June to July, says Stephen. Wonderful. So yes, all right, Krista, May to June. Nice, early bird. So it definitely looks like we have a variety of responses. It looks like at least the wheels are starting to turn for most of you to think about this. And I have just been alerted by the calendar that we are only 2 months away from October, which is absolutely crazy. But we did want to use this session as a way to help us, start to brainstorm some of what it is that we hope to achieve during that month. So for those of you who have some planning underway, next question for you all in the chat. Are you going to be doing mostly remote or mostly in person? Or are you going to be doing a hybrid approach this year? We know that different regions around the world, there's some people that are starting to come back into the offices. We still have some companies that are being a bit more cautious. So it looks like we've got some hybrid options, virtual, remote. All right, Stephen says almost all online. All right, Claudette is going back to in-person. Awesome, wonderful, that's exciting. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty strong mix here of both hybrid and remote. So of course, when we're thinking about how to shift our program from things that previously were lots of in-person trainings, lots of in-person fairs and events and tables and things like that, we certainly have to get creative for how to achieve those key learning objectives, but doing this in either a completely virtual or some type of a hybrid learning experience. So next question in the chat as we move ahead here, how many of you are anticipating or hoping to use gamification within your program? All right, we've got some yes, 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 for sure, says Adam. Great. Excellent. So I think that segues pretty well into what we want to share with you here today. This is certainly a gamified approach to teaching some of those key security awareness principles that are so important for reducing human risk across our organizations. So let's just quickly move back to the slides. All right, so when we really think about making a very valuable October and making that really worth all of the effort that you put in and making it as wonderful of a learning experience as possible for all of our end users. So certainly a few takeaways that we can extrapolate across all different industries, all different organization sizes and regions. A few takeaways, like the first one, the more closely that you try and promote the benefits for people's personal lives into the lessons that you are teaching, the more effective that learning becomes. And I know for those of you who were able to join in on Amanda's keynote today, really building well-rounded, security-minded individuals is ultimately the goal of our programs. So we don't want to differentiate between individuals, what they do at home and what they do at work. We want to have an individual who understands all of the security implications between both of those realms and is able to take those lessons learned, take them home with them, and then also apply them at work. Secondly, making sure that you are building an internal marketing campaign. All of the effort that you put out and all of these great trainings and educational games really don't mean much if nobody knows that they are happening. So please make sure now is a great time to take advantage of partnering with internal communications teams, taking advantage of newsletters, upcoming town halls, anything where you can start to get the word out that these things are happening. And the sooner and the more frequently you can make sure individuals know what is happening, the more likely they are to actually participate. And similar to making sure that you are building an effective internal marketing campaign, make sure, and particularly for anything that involves gamification, make sure that you have tested this as much as you can before you actually release it to your end users. It is absolutely critical that you have as many of those FAQs, any trouble issues already thought through before you roll out to your entire organization. You certainly want things to go as smoothly as possible, and you do not want to be tied down with lots of administrative questions, small troubleshooting issues, things that you could have potentially resolved during a testing period. So we have the whole month of September upcoming. So hopefully if you do pursue gamification in any means, whether that is using the Snack Attack game or any other homegrown gamified efforts, making sure that you thoroughly test those so that they are working correctly before you roll them out. Third on our list, always try and keep your training memorable. So we want to make sure that when individuals leave the training, that there's something that sticks with them. We really want to have that sticky factor so that it's not just another PowerPoint presentation that they have been subjected to. We certainly want to have any takeaways, things that are extrapolations, again, to their personal life that they can remember, any stories that perhaps would be interesting where they would go and they would then share this information with others is certainly what we're going for with our trainings. And of course, and last but not least here, we want to make sure that we are communicating those results for overall management of human risk. So the data that we see through individuals participating in these types of games can help us determine how we want to drive and grow our programs moving forward. So if those of you join any of Nandita's talk during the live track here in Austin, she talked a lot about how we can use data to really measure areas of human risk and then modify our programs appropriately so we are thoroughly covering those topics. So let's move ahead here. So Carl, I think that you're up next to talk a little bit about Snack Attack.
All right. Thank you very much, Neaka. Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks for participating in the Slack channel too. We got more of that coming here a little bit later. I'm actually going to breeze through some of these slides because we really want to show you the demo. But we want to take just a quick moment to introduce what Snack Attack is, why we built it the way that we did. And it really comes down to, we wanted to put our expertise from SANS into a fun, training experience that's designed to engage learners and surface specifically ransomware risk this October, right? I'm sure you all know exactly why. This, of course, is a massive threat facing many of our organizations. But what we didn't want to do was just have another engaging training. We really wanted to take and move the ball forward to do exactly what Neaka just said, right? Let's actually leverage October to both train our folks in a fun and memorable way, but let's also leverage every single interaction that they do so that we can surface some version of how our organization's doing on the key behaviors that prevent ransomware. And that's precisely what we've done. So that's Snack Attack. We all know that the threat is real. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Every single one of us sees these things in the headlines all the time. But I do think it's important to root what we do in data that drives some of these decisions. And this is really important data, right? And so you all can have the slide. You can take a screenshot of it, use it in your own presentations if you feel like it. But this is why we focused on ransomware risk, right? To help organizations really identify what those key behaviors are to prevent them and figure out how we are doing against them. Neaka, over to you. Just give me a second to mute.
All right, can you take us back one slide? No problem. All right, so what we really wanted to drive home with this is that the whole narrative, the whole experiences that your users have will be a very interesting journey through this story. So like Carl had hinted, we're trying to deviate from just your typical linear training where you have information presented to you and then you have an assessment and then you are done. So during this game, when you're interacting in these worlds, we tried to make the tasks through which you are going through as realistic as possible to what real people will be experiencing in their day-to-day work. So although we've taken some liberty and we have set this game in a really fun, futuristic environment, the lessons learned are directly tied to things that you do in your work every day. So we have everything from reviewing emails in an inbox to determine, are they safe or are they potentially malicious? We have the ability in the game for you to analyze the password habits of different individuals. You can see if they're reusing passwords. You can see if they're using things like password managers. You can see if they have two-factor authentication enabled. So these are all things that you can dig into, or things that we would do in our real lives. And we also want to make sure that we covered even social media as well. So we have the opportunity for you to be able to analyze individuals' social media posts and try and discern whether you think that is appropriate sharing or oversharing. So we've tied all of these different things together so that when a learner is progressing through each of these modules, they're constantly making these decisions and interacting with things that would be very similar to what they would be seeing in an actual real workplace that would be set in present day here on Earth rather than our futuristic future world. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide.
All right. Well, this next slide is, we're going to get into the demo actually and stop the share and show you a little bit of a preview of Snack Attack. So we're going to show you a couple different things. I'm going to start by showing you a little bit of the storyline, right? How we bring the immersion and some of those other storytelling elements into making this a memorable experience and kind of set the learner down a journey that's a little bit different, certainly different kind of training than they've ever seen. Then we're going to show you some of the more simple interactions that will measure things like, hey, can people identify whether or not a password is strong, things like that. And then show you some of the more involved interactions. Neaka's going to jump in and walk you through one of her favorites, one of the involved interactions that kind of ties in a lot of key concepts together in a single sequence of interactions. Very, very different than normal training when you'd see like sort of videos and quiz questions. So with that, I'm going to pull up the share and we will dive right in. All right, here we go. So this is just a brief introduction to the storyline. It's not the whole storyline, but it'll give you a sense of the imagery, the animations, the voiceover, and how that experience is going to be for your learners.
In a few years, rogue AI will attain a dangerous amount of power unless we team up now. It's up to us to stop cyber attacks like this one in the news. Recently, the company GabSnacks created an AI to manage production of a meal replacement cookie snack. Everything was fine until the AI's latest software update, which came with an irreversible computer bug that made it entirely unhinged.
The robots have taken over.
It got so hyper-focused on the goal of producing meal replacement cookies that it became ferociously power-hungry, stealing millions of dollars, disrupting large-scale food production, blackmailing mass media, eventually even threatening the peace of entire countries, all through common cyber attacks like the ones our company faces every day. But as cybersecurity defenders for our organization, we have the chance right now to prevent all of this. So, what do you say? You in?
Okay, so that should give you a little bit of a sense of some of the storyline, and then the rest of the modules follow this same storyline. The learner's going to go down a series of missions. There are 4 missions in total. We've designed them intentionally to be broken up for every week of October. Although last year we saw several of our clients take on the entirety of the program at once. We give you the flexibility. So the content is delivered in 4 SCORM modules, and you can either deliver them every week, you can deliver them at once, and have people take it at their own pace, okay? And then the storyline continues through the rest of the modules, right? You're gonna continually hear from CM22, our friendly futuristic robot, and he's gonna continually guide you down the path of what the challenges were and how we can prevent these ransomware attacks happening in the first place. And so with that, I'd like to jump over to one of the more simple interactions, and I'm going to play this one and actually show you how it works. So the structure of the game is such that when the learner first comes in, we're actually not doing training. We're actually assessing what they already know about these key behaviors and how to employ them, okay? So we call it internally, although the learner will never know this, we call it internally the pre-test, and then they get some feedback about how they did. How did you do on spotting phishing, for example, or recognizing strong passwords, for example? Give them some feedback on what they did right and wrong, and then send them on the mission to actually accomplish, sort of winning the day, right? So what I'm going to show you is one of the simpler interactions that we employed in the pre-test. And this one is specifically on passwords. Give you 1 second.
We will start with Li Shen, a business analyst for a mid-sized retail company. As we know well, cyber attackers can easily hack into any of her accounts that are poorly protected by weak passwords. But what might those weak passwords look like? Help Li Shen determine which password she needs to change and strengthen so she can better protect herself.
Okay, so you can see here, and I'm now being asked, should I change these or should I keep these? And again, we haven't actually done any instruction on passwords yet. We're trying to assess the learner where they are today before we progress them through the training. So that looks like a pretty simple password. I don't think Li Shen should be using that. So I'm going to say we want to change that one. And then the learner's told that the results will be at the end of the assessment, and they can keep going through. This one looks pretty strong. Hot sauce on everything, mixing characters, etc. I'm going to keep that one. This one looks pretty strong too. Comic water oatmeal spring with dashes. No, not really connected words at all. I'm going to keep that. Ooh, this one looks strong, doesn't it? But she's used hot sauce on everything in another password and just added 32. Tricky. I think I'm going to go ahead and change that one.
Now you have to help.
So that's a quick example of one of the simpler interactions. And now Neaka is going to demonstrate one of the more involved interactions that we particularly love this one. So we're super excited to show you.
For this mission, you'll first look through the posts each targeted journalist made prior to the attack to help identify how they were hacked. You'll then need to figure out which.
So with this one,
Mission
this actually
Control
focuses
just
closely
pinged
on
us
social
Jacob's
media.
most
And
recent
it's really
Facebook
interesting
feed.
because much like in
Review
real
the
life, you
Facebook
can go
posts
through
Jacob
someone's
made
feed.
prior to
We
the
have
attack.
first here with Jacob, we're looking at a Facebook feed, and you can start to determine whether posts are safe and benign, or whether some of these posts might verge on a little bit of oversharing. And this is a great exercise because this is really what social engineers do in real life. They will go through social media sources and they will try and extract information about you that can be relevant to their attacks.
Jacob seems like he has got some interesting things
So
going
here
on
then
in
we are
his
looking
life.
now. So this
But all of
exercise,
this
what we really like
information
about
made
this is that we're
public can
combining
act as a
multiple
welcome
different attack
invitation for
vectors
cyber
and different
attackers.
learning
Let's
objectives here.
explore
So
some
we're
of the
talking about
emails in
oversharing on
Jacob's
social
inbox
media,
from the
but then
days
we're also
following
now
his
looking
posts.
through Jacob's inbox here and trying to understand which of these emails may have contained a targeted attack based on the information that we saw that this individual was sharing on social media. So it's really starting to bridge the gap between these different concepts and seeing how actually in practice someone would either from an attack side attempt to do these types of attacks, or from a defender side, from our side, how we can perhaps pull back on the type of information we share so that an attacker wouldn't be able to put together such an accurate picture of our presence online and also be able to craft their attacks so effectively. Excellent. Carl spotted it.
Ah, the GabSnacks AI must have learned about Jacob's passion for.
All right, and there you'll also see some real-time feedback in the sessions themselves. And then as the learning progresses, CM22 is there along the whole way. Thank you, Neaka, for showing that part. I know you and I loved creating that. That was a lot of fun. It was really, for those of you that created content like this, you know, it can be painstaking, but it can be a lot of fun when you nail something. You're like, oh my gosh, that came out really good. So what I want to talk about next is how are we actually surfacing human risk through this program? So I mentioned that every single interaction that the learner is going through, we are leveraging XAPI to send what those interactions were sort of back into this dashboard. And you'll see we've got the 6 key behaviors that can prevent your workforce from being sort of overtaken by ransomware. Browser updates, data security, incident reporting, passwords, phishing, and social engineering are all covered throughout the training. Most of those interactions are happening both in pre and post-test scenarios. And so we can track all of that using XAPI, which is just a fancy learning technology, so that we can get a good snapshot at the entirety of our workforce of where we are against those key behaviors. We've also got, Lance wrote us recommended program actions based on how the organization is doing in each of those areas. So for example, if your organization is doing great on browser updates and passwords and phishing, but maybe not so good on data security, you're going to immediately after running this program have insight into, hey, we've got some things to tweak around data security for our particular organization. So now this is, of course, training data. This isn't endpoint data. This isn't behavioral analysis data. This is training data. This is meant to give you some guidance and some guideposts, if you will, into we might have risk here. We might need to do something different in our program as a result here. This isn't pinpointing precise risk in that case. So which is why we've used words on the dashboard like ransomware strength score, strength and weakness, things like that, to give you some insights, but not necessarily definitive, all derived from the training. And Neaka's going to share a little bit about the next one.
Yes, so the additional detailed program feedback that you get based on your results. So we really went through a very explicit process to make sure that all of the questions that you will find in this game, that they all map back to key learning objectives. So based on how your players perform on these questions, whether they do really well on some or whether they do quite poorly, gives you feedback that you can use to help improve your program and to help target those particular areas in which you're seeing the most prevalent human risks. And as Carl mentioned, Lance was very helpful in helping piece together some specific recommendations around each of these areas. So again, if you're finding that perhaps there's particular questions that your users are really struggling on, you can turn to this program feedback and it can help you find ways to start building up and to bolster your program, specifically in those areas in which you are seeing some weaknesses.
Awesome. Thank you, Neaka. Yeah, and just one more quick point on this. We've designed this dashboard to be simple and actionable right away. We don't envision people spending a lot of time on here. You know, the data is going to be populating as people take the training. So you kind of have to wait until the end to really get really actionable stuff. But the idea is come in, spend no more than 5, maybe 10 minutes looking at the results, export it out into whatever format you want, and report on the results so that you can tailor your program. We don't want you spending hours and hours of analysis in here. We know that security awareness officers have a lot of time constraints, and so we want to make this optimized. And so with that, I know we are getting back to the main track. Let me just wrap us up here by saying the program comes with a complete toolkit for success. I mentioned SCORM, we're going to skip over that. We have really broad language support. We have this dashboard that I mentioned. Neaka will talk for 2 seconds about the toolkit that we've developed, and then we will wrap here.
Yes, so the toolkit for all of us security awareness officers, and particularly those of us who might be leading a team of one, we have given you all of the resources that you need in this toolkit so that you can hit the ground running for October. So we include that promo video. We had seen a little bit of that demoed earlier. We also have badge icons for when individuals pass a specific module. We have social tiles that you can use to promote this. Of course, we have copies of rules, so you do not have to try and detail that yourself. We've thought through documentation for all of those things. Even the completion certificate that you can make available, whether you put this on your own LMS or if you host it through SANS.
All right, very good. So the last slide just gives you a URL to go to if you want to learn more. You can just go to go.sans.org/snackattack. We will also be monitoring a Slack channel if you want to learn more. Just dump it into the Carl Neaka. I will personally respond to those as well throughout the summit. Thank you so much for your time and attention. You've got a couple minutes before the next session starts, so hopefully you enjoyed this time. And if there are questions that we didn't get to, we will get to them in the Slack before the end of the summit. Thank you so much.